Try to do one more program here.
Okay.
Before we go, we got 20 minutes. What? Yeah, you got 15 minutes. I can program that fast. Let's do it.
Share. I'm going to bring up the case study.
Yeah, bring up 2.
All right, so this is a baseball
player. I want people
player.
to see the second one, and this is an athlete, so I want everyone to see an athlete. I can stay on and answer questions afterwards when you have to piece.
Okay, cool. All right, so case study 2, 17-year-old baseball player, right-handed pitcher. Training, he's trained 4 days a week in the summer, 2 or 3 days a week in season, preseason. So depending on the time of the year, anywhere from 4 days to 2 or 3 days. Once the pitching started, we had to kind of pull back a little bit. Like most 17-year-old pitchers, number one goal was to gain weight, improve his strength and power, improve his pitching performance. Also, he had some right soreness in his shoulder and pain just from the amount of volume of throwing he had been doing, and we'll get into specifically what that was when we get to the next page. Subjectively, when I kind of asked him, hey, like, what are your outcomes? He said, like, my right shoulder is just achy, get some pain through the pec, collarbone, rib cage area. But he really wanted to bring his velocity up. This is a kid that's, he's 5'10", 160 pounds roughly. And he had, when I say objectively, what was he being dealt with? He had a thoracic outlet brachial plexus issue he had been seeing a PT for, and still just not completely resolved. So we wanted to put some meat on his bones, so to speak, and just get some regularity in that shoulder. I mean, he's someone who has a lot of layback, like you see in this picture. So just obviously there's going to be some abnormal stresses in that shoulder, but nothing too crazy. No training history, very low training age. So we had a lot to work with. Again, big empty bucket. During preseason, like I said, 2 or 3 days a week, when baseball was about 3 or 4 days a week, but then we would flip the other way in the off season. So we would go training 4 days a week, and his baseball would be down to 2 or 3. And like any strength coach now, I'm constantly battling with the parents and with the club coaches, and like they want him to throw every day, all freaking year, which is insane. So I'm constantly trying to educate him, educate the parents, get them to pull back on the amount of bullpen time, because I think a lot of the problems he had in his shoulder were pure volume throwing issues, is why he was dealing with things. So a big part of our programming was education, as far as teaching them, listen, we got to kind of tone down the throwing. You don't need to throw all year long. Looking at squat, overhead squat was a big one, mainly because of core stability. He's not stiff. I mean, he's a 17-year-old boy. His hips aren't stiff. If I look him on the table, it's fine. He had shoulder mobility issues, specifically in that right side, that we needed to work through, and mainly core stability issue, which is also, I think, why his shoulder kind of propped up, is because he's just generally, as Mike always says, like he's got a bad case of weakness. Push-up was a 1. Be it 1, he's just generally kind of weak. Core stability was poor, and his shoulder mobility is a 1 on the right, 2 on the left. So there were just some things we had to work with. We had to improve there, but nothing really crazy. Just generally weak. No training history. Overall needed strength in core strength and upper body strength. Lower body strength wasn't terrible, but I mean, obviously could get way better, but noticeably lacking upper body and core strength. So pretty straightforward assessment, which is going to be a much different kind of outcome for him. Do note that he was dealing with some pain in the shoulder, and that we had a unique situation with him being a pitcher.
Got it. All right. You want to stop sharing your screen?
Yep.
All right. Let's do this. So we got 3 days here. We're going to go linear emphasis, lateral emphasis, linear emphasis on the other day. Next week would go lateral, linear, lateral. But for the purpose of this, I'm going to break it out with 2 linear days. So this linear day is just going to be the same as this one right here. So you will alternate linear and lateral days with an athlete. Adults just do both together. They don't need separate days. They're not doing any true speed work because of the risk of injury. So soft tissue stuff, was there any extra soft tissue stuff you did with him other than just foam rolling?
Yeah, specifically for the shoulder, looking at the mobility, like the foam rolling, we did a lot of work in the posterior shoulder aspect, like pinning and stretching, pec underneath that collarbone, like in that like subclavius muscle, subscap, like all around the shoulder, front and back, because he had the thoracic outlet type stuff. A lot of kind of anterior compression of the rib cage that we had to work through. So I just did a lot of rolling in there. And just stemming from that, as you write that, Brad Atkinson asked, for an athlete with thoracic outlet can lead to history of neck tweaks and pain. Absolutely. Typically what I find, and I'm not a PT, like he came from a PT, I spoke with the PT, I assessed him. This was a collaborative effort, and I didn't diagnose him with thoracic outlet. He came to me with it. A lot of compression of the nerve bundles and brachial plexus here. So he had subclavius pressure, pec, subscap, a lot of breathing work to try to open that up, which is kind of counterintuitive. Sometimes everyone says, oh, don't breathe through here. Well, he had like a sunken chest. So I had to get him to breathe and open some of that stuff up. And it can lead to stuff in the scalenes and the neck and SCM. So yeah, it could definitely be connected.
I just put breath work and motor control. Any specific stretches or just your typical stretch, hips, ankles, and shoulders? Any specific stretches?
A couple outside the norm, yeah. Sleeper stretch for the shoulder. He was very limited in internal rotation, as you'd expect with a right-handed pitcher. Pec stretching on the roller, like the snow angels, essentially, where he's actively pressing into the floor.
Yep.
And active breathing with like a lat stretch, so with the band, and trying to pull down me, just because that shoulder was just pretty jacked from all the volume.
Got it. Motor control.
Supine, nothing really out of the ordinary. Supine breathing, floor sliding, leg lowering, all the normal stuff in the group, really.
Got it. So breath work, floor slide, leg lower. We'll say lunge circuit. Okay, and dynamic warm-up. Typical, just linear warm-up, lateral warm-up?
Yeah, pretty typical.
Okay. If anyone wants to know what the whole linear warm-up and lateral warm-up is, type in on YouTube MBSC linear warm-up and then MBSC lateral warm-up.
A couple quick question and answer I'll get to. Jennifer Machuda said, different conditioning for baseball, softball players, coaches I work with want him to run. What's your stance on that? I want him to row. No different really. He still runs tempos, does sprints, does slide board, especially as a pitcher. I want him doing slide board and frontal plane. So nothing different as far as conditioning goes, but definitely sprint focus, not long focus. But no, I did not have him row. Jamie Del Rosario said, when you're differentiating between adults and athletes, where do weekend warriors, adult competitors, age group competitors fall? Is there in between group when it comes to programming? This can be difficult because we have a lot of adults who are perfectly happy being in an adult group. Like we said, like they don't have aspirations of being like a weekend warrior. They just want to feel better, and that's fine. But then you have some people who want a little bit more, and sometimes we'll give them like kind of like a little bit of a tweak of their program. Like I'll be like, hey, yeah, why don't we work in this for a few weeks? And I'll kind of those are the people, like Brendon said, that bring a notebook or want the program printed.
Right, less than 5% of your people.
Yeah, and those people will just create some tweaks. I in the summer sometimes have some of those weekend warriors join my college group. Like I had 2 women who were in their 40s in my college athlete group this summer. Not common whatsoever, but they wanted to work on that stuff, and they're both like competitive athletes. And so they worked out with the college kids. And we'll make those tweaks because they're not that common. But when you do have it, we'll accommodate them because they're customers, they're paying customers. We want to make them happy and do so. So let's get into the lift quick before I got to run here. So upper body explosive, we didn't have to make any changes, even though he had the complaints about the shoulder. It's all asymptomatic when he throws med balls, and med ball throwing was important to him. It's important to me. It's also something that I identified that he saw value in as an athlete. And part of getting people to buy in the program is giving them things that they see value in. So, and those were all asymptomatic for him. So we did overhead throwing. We actually did one arm chest pass specifically because he was a pitcher. That was like a small tweak I made.
So day 1, I have overhead throw. Day 2, I have side toss. And day 3, I have chest pass with one arm. So what do we got for lower body power?
Hop, bound, and jump in different varieties each day. So one would be a hop, one would be a jump, one would be a bound.
So box jump, lateral bound, and medial lateral hops.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna skip core corrective here so we can get to lifting because.
And just as a note, he would sprint because he was an athlete. That's like when we have our sprinting work. So he was essentially doing time sprints instead of that core corrective stuff anyway. So flying 10s, flying 15s, things like that.
Let's put that then. So flying 10, and then just, would you say flying 15 or just a regular sprint?
He was doing 10-yard sprints every day he came in. And then with the way our progression for sprinting goes is like you go from a dead start 10-yard sprint to a flying sprint to like you work your way through. So he's sprinting like all our athletes. He's mainly a pitcher, but to get more output in his nervous system, we're still sprinting every day, no matter what.
And then what's the lateral sprint now?
Well, so on lateral days, we'll work on things like crossovers.
Okay. So just a reminder to everyone, we have 2 linear days and then our lateral days. So side toss, lateral bound, and crossover are all lateral drills. So they fit in on lateral day, and then we have 2 linear days here. Just throwing that out there. Okay, bilateral hip dominant, we'll say trap bar, right?
Well, so just for a note, because he was in the athlete group, right?
Yeah.
He would be doing some sort of heavy implement power because, most of the athletes would be hang cleaning, right?
Yeah.
But an important note, him as a baseball player, he's not going to hang clean. So he would do kettlebell swings both days.
Okay. KB swing.
With baseball players, we tend to try to avoid, and then the middle day, I would have them do loaded jump squats. We tend to avoid having to do hang cleans with baseball players, pitchers, tennis athletes, people who rely on hand, elbow, and wrist health. With baseball, we tend to avoid it. There's already a lot of distractive stress on the shoulder from them throwing. Having them hang clean tends to add to that. So we tend to just find a power alternative for throwing athletes, athletes who are very dependent on hand, wrist, and elbow and shoulder specifically.
Got it. And did you do any overhead pressing with him, or did you avoid overhead pressing?
No, we did like landmine and push up.
Okay, so landmine.
I tend to try to avoid overhead pressing, and I try to avoid pressing where their scapula is going to be pinned, because I want them to be able to get upward rotation, protraction, retraction. So as opposed to things like bench press, I tend to choose push up. I tend to choose landmine press. I tend to choose cable press.
Do you do chin up with him?
No, X pull down, row, any rowing variation.
Okay, X pull down. So what I got here then is I got kettlebell swing with dumbbell row. Then I got TRX row with loaded jumps on day 2. KB swing, what other horizontal row can we do? Like a cable row?
Cable row would be fine.
Cable row. All right, anti-extension with him. We got like ball rollout, wheel rollout.
Yeah, once we worked on basic core strength, he could start to do ball rollouts and things like that.
Okay, ball rollout, body saw, and
I actually did. I would probably do ball rollout twice a week with him because it was something we had to work on for a while.
Okay.
Because it was so hard for him to have sagittal control of his spine and his pelvis. We did that pretty frequently.
Got it. Did you do any like extra stuff in between, like more pec or cuff stuff?
Yeah, more shoulder mobility.
Okay. Shoulder mode. Okay, what were the big unilateral lifts with him?
Unilateral, we did RFEs, we did sled marching, we did single leg deadlift.
All right, sled march. So just for context, I gave on the open exercise, I gave him shoulder mobility stuff every day. Rear foot elevated split squat. So now we're on 3A. So our third quad set. Rear foot elevated split squat one day, sled march the other day, and single leg deadlift the other day.
Mm-hmm.
And then his push is going to be landmine press, push up, and then X pull downs for his vertical push pull. Anti-rotation, we'll do holds. Did he do suitcase carries or anything?
Yeah, he did a lot of carries actually because of the overall strength, core stability, and shoulder stability that you get from it. Before I have to get off here, I'm going to try to answer a couple questions real quick. So, okay. Softball pitchers, okay to do hand cleans. Again, when they're younger, if anybody's real young, whether it's baseball, soccer, whatever sport, I don't cue them as that athlete. I just think of them as athlete. Once they start to get older, 16, 17, 18, then maybe I start to pull things out. So maybe an older softball pitcher, I might pull it out and just have them do swings. And I tend to like swings better for translation to rotational power sports anyways. So I kind of like that adjustment for hand cleans. If an athlete's working with you multiple days in a row, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, sometimes maybe you just switch an exercise here or there. But in the grand scheme of things, it's probably not a huge deal as long as you're kind of monitoring how sore they are. Opposed to kettlebell snatch, knowing it's technically overhead, probably wouldn't do it. Even if you think like, hey, I might get some good shoulder stability out of kettlebell snatch or dumbbell snatch, it's never worth it if it goes wrong, because you're going to be the first one to hear about it from a coach or from a parent if they're like, oh, I told you they shouldn't have done anything overhead. I like swings as a power exercise for most rotational power athletes anyways. So,
real quick, can you answer conditioning for him? So 2 linear days and 1 lateral day conditioning. Slide board lateral day?
Slide board and bike was on the lateral day. Pretty typical for our athlete program.
Bike for how long?
He would do the interval work and then he would do interval work on the slide board as well as interval work on the bike. So like 10 20s on the bike and then 20 seconds on, about a minute off on the slide board.
Okay, and then linear days, run?
He'd run both tempos in phase 1 and then shuttles when he got to phase 2.
Okay, got it. If you need to hop off, I can answer the rest of the questions.
Yeah, I think. All right, guys, thank you. We'll do this again next week, and I'll probably have longer next week. I just have to get on another call right now. So thank you very much, and talk next week. Brendon, thank you. Jenny, thank you so much for everything.
So I'm staying on if people want to ask more questions. So for anti-rotation here, day 3, I'm going to make that a land. Yeah, let's go landmine rotations with him. So then we have down here, we have our day 1 high impact conditioning is tempos phase 1. Day 2, our lateral is going to be slide board conditioning. And then day 3, so like Kevin was saying, he did tempos both days, but phase 2, they moved to shuttle running. So I think the big thing to take away here is that you build a template as so on the side here. So your buckets, and then you fill those buckets almost kind of with whatever you want. So the exercises you want to use, everyone here is going to use something a little bit different than what I use, based off of experience, based off of what courses you've taken. If you've taken the CFSC, then you understand our philosophy. So the big thing is that you have these buckets to fill. You have a template that you use consistently, and that you have regressions and progressions for each exercise. So I know what to do if this exercise shouldn't work. So for example, a goblet squat is baseline where everyone starts. If you can't goblet squat, then you squat press out, or you squat with your heels up, which are 2 really quick regressions, or you assisted squat. You assist the squat with a band, a bench, a chair, whatever that is. And then you progress the squat by either adding weight, which you can do with more kettlebells, more dumbbells, more barbell, or you change the position of the load. So instead of having it on your front, you move it to the back, or you go overhead. So every single exercise can be regressed and progressed just like that. And then you put it all into your template. And the cool thing about this is if you have your working template, then you know where you're starting with everybody each time. So you don't have to write a brand new program every time. You just fill in the empty slots. So let's answer some questions here. Do you like suitcase marching? Yes, love suitcase marching. We do suitcase carries because we have 50 yards of turf and you can walk down and back. If you don't have turf to walk down and back, you hold that kettlebell in place. So think of suitcase carry as a walking side plank, and you just march in place. Get those knees up nice and high, and then you do it for time. I usually do 30 seconds to 40 seconds. Any longer than that, I don't want to watch somebody march in place for 3 minutes straight. So I keep it to about 30 seconds, and then you just increase the weight. Other questions here. Is it really that easy to make a program for a professional athlete regardless of sport? Yes, it really is that easy. Again, everyone wants their sport to be different, but it's not that different. We're all human beings. We all need the same movement patterns. So I would say that for each, again, I use the 80-20 rule. If you play baseball, 20% of your program needs to be different than somebody who plays football. Football needs to be 20% different than someone who plays basketball. But again, we're all made up of pretty much the same muscles and bones, the same movements. We all have a neurological system, a lymphatic system, and a cardiovascular system. So this programming works for, again, 80% of your people. 20% of your people, this program isn't going to work for. So again, I don't want this isn't a dictatorship. This works for most, not for everybody. And that's how I sell the CFSC as well. The CFSC course is not an end-all, be-all. I always say you're going to cast a really big net and you're going to catch a lot of fish, but you're not going to catch all the fish. That's where you have to go learn from other people and then sprinkle in the stuff that we do here. I know you said no chin-ups. Would you do a neutral grip pull-up with a baseball player or always do X pull-downs? Again, like Kevin said, at 16 years old, you become an athlete. Anything under the age of 16, you're just a kid. So you do everything in the gym. I don't delineate if you're an athlete or until the age of 16. You could do neutral grip. I prefer if they have a full floor slide. That's my mobility drill. If they have a full floor slide, then I let them do chin-ups. And I would go neutral grip chin-ups with that athlete. If they don't have a full floor slide, I don't do chin-ups because full floor slide is essentially a chin-up on your back. And if you can't do it on the ground with gravity helping you, you're not going to stand up and magically be able to do it in a chin-up position or a pressing position. I have a second follow-up question about thoracic outlet. If you have a client who tweaked their neck. Tweak their neck. Lower body work if they can handle it. Most of the time, I just tell them to take a couple days off. Let that nerve calm down. If you're in pain, your body's going to be guarding, and it won't necessarily let you get any better. I would prefer you go for a walk. Just take good care of yourself, and so that we can train harder later. If you do want them to do something, yeah, you could stay lower body. But again, anything where you have to hold the weight is going to use that neck muscle. So most of the time, I just tell them to take the time off until they're better. Why landmine press instead of kettlebell rack? Landmine press. So the landmine press accommodates for my shoulder range of motion. So when I press a landmine, it's about 70 degrees of shoulder flexion when that AC joint starts to rub, if you should have that pinching pain. So notice my end range of motion, not using my lumbar spine, is about like 75, 80 degrees. I shouldn't be pressing overhead because the only way I can get my arms over my head, because my shoulder mobility is so bad, that is a 1 and then a really bad 1 on the FMS. If I press over my head, I have to use my low back. So the landmine press accommodates for that lack of range of motion. When you program the rear foot elevator, do you program that with a single leg squat in the same program? Yeah, same program, just different days. So the question was, do you do rear foot elevated split squats and single leg squats in the same program, or do you do that in different phases? So day 1 might be rear foot elevated split squats here, and then day 3 might be our single leg squats. So we do both. Most people progress to rear foot elevated split squats quicker than they do to single leg squats because of the difficulty of the exercise. For an athlete on this 3-day program, will you essentially repeat 3-day exercises for the entire phase? Yes, we repeat the same exact exercises for all 4 weeks so that you get really, really good at them. And then once 4 weeks comes, we either progress the exercises for another 4 weeks, or if you haven't mastered it yet, you do it again for another 4 weeks. So you have two options. You can go to a progression, or you can stay on the same line or same path that you were already on in the last phase. That way it makes our programming next phase a little bit easier, because I know what you did last phase, so we can either do the same thing, or I know exactly what my progressions are going to be for the next one. How would you fit this 1-hour program in a team setting with limited time? I wouldn't do all this. I would do about half of this in a 1-hour program in a team setting. So I would do movement prep, power, strength, and conditioning. I would probably bring it all down to, I would just squeeze it and take a couple of these things out. I'd still do I'd probably get rid of foam rolling and just stretch instead. I would probably get rid of a lot of the motor control stuff and go to dynamic warm up. I would make sure, again, if you lift weights properly, you warm up, you condition, you get all of your stretching in, right? Because again, a loaded split squat in a good position is a loaded quad stretch, if you really think about it. So proper strength training will always be the glass for me that you want to fill up. That's my main bucket always. If I'm limited on time, do you use swings and loaded jumps on the strength block? So swings and loaded jumps are an explosive exercise, but yes, they can be in the strength block. Here's the thing. When you know the rules, you can break the rules. So the rules here were lower body explosive. He did box jump, lateral bound, and medial lateral hurl hops. But we added more explosive stuff because he was an athlete and a good athlete that needed it into our strength block. That's perfectly okay. Again, when you know the rules, you can break the rules, and it's your template. So now remember, you don't have to fill all of these up, and you can always put in something else. It's just a guide so that you can make a better decision. What do you recommend for somebody who has a hard time gripping with the suitcase carry? If it's because they're weak, keep doing it. If it's because it's an actual neurological issue, you could use those wrist straps that go around the kettlebell. So weakness, keep going, get stronger. Not a weakness, use straps so that they can still get the benefit of holding the weight out to their side. I'm going to answer all these questions. I don't even know how many people are still on this call, but avoid overhead presses or Olympic lifting with throwing athletes. Use primary shoulders and wrists. Is limited to activity, or it depends on their mechanics and shoulder limitations. So again, it has more, for me, it has a lot to do with their limitations, especially if you're younger. Now, if you are a professional athlete and you make $50 million a year on your arm, I'm not going near that arm. I might keep it healthy with some rowing and pressing with cables and some stuff where you definitely can't get hurt, but I am not messing with that $1 million arm. If you have a full floor slide, that's my tell. If you have a full floor slide, you're pretty much good to go for a lot of things. If you don't have a full floor slide, or you don't have a 2-2 on the FMS, we're not doing anything pressing overhead. I don't care who you are, whether you're a professional athlete or a high school athlete or a volleyball player or a tennis player, baseball player. So again, this is the art of coaching piece. I don't have an exact answer. The answer really is it depends. But for us, when it's a large group, it's easier to default to not doing it when it's a group of 12 to 15 athletes that play a specific sport. But that means they do everything else. So that's about 20% of our program is overhead pressing and overhead rowing. Again, 80-20. So if you're an athlete, you're doing the rest of the stuff. but we're going to skip over the overhead stuff. How much recovery time between exercises? However long it takes you to get to the next thing. We don't have a specific time. It's walk to the next exercise, do the next one, walk to the next one, grab a drink of water, do the next one. Empirically, we know physiologically or mentally when to go to the next exercise. Like, we don't start the next set if we're huffing and puffing. We wait until we're done, until we're ready to go again. But when we have an hour to get a lot of this stuff in. Sometimes you do have to push people a little bit. Is it ideal? No. Ideally, you'd fully recover between everything, but that would take you 4.5 hours to do one workout. When it comes to athletes who are playing 2 games per week, top-level soccer players, how would you organize the workout? Volume, intensity, exactly what you've seen here. 2 times a week, top-level soccer players. Top-level soccer players generally have a very low training age because soccer players don't lift weights their whole life like football players do, or other strength athletes. So honestly, it really is this right here. I might not do as much running with them since they do so much damn running anyways. I would spend most of my time. So we're thinking buckets here. So if we have 4 buckets, we have the mobility bucket, we have the strength bucket, we have the power bucket, and we have the conditioning bucket. Soccer players already have the conditioning bucket full. The mobility bucket, you have to do an assessment or watch them move. But they definitely need more strength and power almost always. When you run, who are the best soccer players are the ones who get to the ball first. So the ones who have the most power and speed. So I would spend most of my time on power and speed if I had soccer players that were playing twice a week. We have, do you use swings and loaded jumps? Oh, I answered that. What would you do to help improve floor slide? Do more floor slides. Again, external rotation stretching. I like if you grab a PVC pipe, you can put the PVC pipe in the back of the shoulder and stretch the shoulder that way. That's a good one I've taken from Kelly Starrett's mobility wad. So you've got the PVC stretch. You've also got the bench T-spine stretch. So you grab a PVC pipe, hands out, elbows on, sit your butt back. So you're trying to get that external rotation back so they can get their palms down to the ground. Also, any thoracic extension stuff. So if I'm stuck in flexion here, it's going to be real hard for me to get my shoulders back. So more rowing stuff. Also, you might just never ever get it back, which is totally fine. There are no floor slide Olympics. I'm not going to the Olympics for baseball or anything overhead. I just want to be healthy. So getting that shoulder range of motion or the floor slide back is ideal, but there's not a whole lot of things in my life that it really affects personally. So again, will I put in the work that needs to go in to get my floor slide back? I'm a terrible client, just like all the rest of your clients, so probably not. I wish I had a better answer for improving floor slides, but really it's like building a bicep, right? You want to build your bicep. Do you do one set of curls and then your arm is huge the next day? It's the same thing for stretching and mobility work. Like, it takes consistent effort 3 times a week for years to build a big biceps. It's the same thing for getting better at floor slides or stretching. Breathing before or after mobility and stretching. We do it after because nobody comes in early to do breath work. And so we have to force our breath work. So in a theoretical sense, it would be best to do breathing first. But no, people come in early and foam roll and stretch, but nobody comes in early to do breath work. So we have to force them to do it after mobility and stretching. Ideally, too, you would also include the breathing in your mobility work. So when I exhale and rotate on a T-spine rotation, I exhale and move. So when you incorporate breathing into exercises, people are way more likely to do it and complain about it less. Because when you're laying on your back in a gym that's bumping music, it's really hard to get into the whole breath thing. So good in theory, but in practice, it can be really hard to implement breath stuff. Do you ever use contrast work? Yes, in phase 4, Matt, we use contrast work. So contrast work would be, for example, like you do a heavy bench press and then you throw chest pass after it, and then you do push-ups, and then you do assisted explosive push-ups. Lower body would be a heavy, heavy trap bar to a vertical jump to a kettlebell swing to an assisted jump. But again, that's phase 4. So athletes don't get there until week 16. And it's athletes only. We don't do it with our adults because of the possible tissue damage. So we do use it, but only in phase 4. And a lot of athletes won't get there. Again, less than 20% of your people will get to phase 4 contrast work. So I love it, but it's not for most people. What advice do you give for not overthinking programming? This. Honestly, follow this template, plug in your exercises. It doesn't have to be any more difficult than that. As you get better, more experience, you take more courses, you read more books, you can sprinkle in all of those things on your foundation. This to me is the foundation here. I think people overthink sets, reps, times. My sport is different than your sport. They go too deep into the mobility hole. So make strength your main focus and then build everything around that and have a template where you plug all of your exercises in. How often are you doing inhale and rotation to get more diaphragmatic excursion as opposed to rib cage expansion? Bobby, so here's my thing with breathing. There's breathing strategies. The problem is there are people who only breathe one way. So in all of our movement prep stuff, I coach a lot of the breath work. Inhale, exhale drops the rib cage down and move. So I want to move from a stable trunk or a trunk where the pelvis and rib cage sit on top of each other. So it's exhale and move. When I deadlift heavy, you want to hold your breath. So you're going to exhale, grab that barbell or the trap bar, inhale. You want to, the Valsalva maneuver makes you stronger. So when it comes to strength work, I actually have a lot of people that if it's under 5 reps, hold your breath. I mean, we know that makes you stronger. The problem, there are people who hold their breath in order to do low-level things like tie their shoes, or people who sleep with their mouths open. So essentially, you're basically breath holding all night long while you sleep. You're supposed to sleep and be rested and breathe nice and easy. People sleep like they're deadlifting 500 pounds or running a 100-meter sprint. When you run a 100-meter sprint, the best athletes in the world only take 3 breaths. So breathing strategies. I want to know when I need to use my breath to drive mobility. I want to know when I use my breath on high repetition exercise. If you're doing kettlebell swings for 20 reps, you better be breathing, because if you hold your breath, you're going to pass out. If I'm going to deadlift double my body weight, I better hold my breath or I'm going to maybe fold in half. So it's knowing when to use each strategy. I mean, that's at least my opinion and how I use it in training. There are going to be people who don't agree with that, and that's totally fine. But that's how I think of breath work, is you need to selectively use it for each exercise or what it is you're trying to do. There isn't one right way to breathe, in my opinion. Do you use intensity, absolute or relative? We use relative intensity. So again, how do you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how difficult or easy was that? If it's under a 5, I stick with what I just did. If it's over a 5, I usually stick with whatever weight it was. If it's under a 5, then I increase the weight or increase the difficulty of that exercise. Woo! I'm not going to get to all these questions. I'm going to answer 2 more. To what? Which one? Okay, so how would you adjust your athlete when your athlete is working with you multiple days in a row, Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday? Multiple days in a row, it pretty much stays the same as this. I got linear one day, lateral the other day. I'm still following my movement, all my patterns. I've got linear conditioning, lateral conditioning. Are they going to be sore? Yes. Is it ideal? No. 2 days a week, if they're right in a row, maybe you pick this is from Cal Dietz's stuff in triphasic training. You have a high day, a low day. Charlie Francis used to do this too. So maybe I have my linear day is going to be my really intense day, with more of my neurological work. And then my second day is going to be more of our like lighter, like bench press type exercises, more strength stuff and less neurological type stuff. Would softball pitchers be okay doing? Kevin answered that. Would you be opposed to kettlebell snatching? No, it's technically. Would you be opposed to kettlebell snatch knowing it's technically overhead? We do tons of kettlebell snatch with any athlete who is not an overhead athlete. Again, if you're under the age of 16, you're just a kid. So everyone under 16 does kettlebell snatch one day. They do cleans the other day. If you are over 16 and you're an overhead athlete, we do not dumbbell snatch. We either do another day of cleans, or we do kettlebell swing, or we do a Vertimax jump, or a weighted jump. So those are our kettlebell snatch we do. I just didn't have it in this program because he was a baseball player. Remember, this was just 2 case studies. There's hundreds of other exercises, bunch of different case studies that we could do. These were the 2 that we picked for today. Okay, so that's it. We still have 76 people on here, so that's pretty good. Thanks for watching. We are going to send out, everyone has access to that, to the program that we've built out here for those 2 people. Scroll down to see the see case study 2. And also there's a blank one because we didn't get to case study 3, so you can print that out and use that for your own usage. What else am I missing here? We have the CFSC course right now is $150 off if you want to take it online with all this COVID stuff going on. I have a product that I've called Exercise Checklist. If you go to exercisechecklist.com, it is a bunch of checklists for all these exercises or regressions and progressions of each of these with standards. And when I say standard, we know organically after watching thousands and thousands of workouts and repetitions what each person should be good at, or what a good, I get the question all the time, how do I know when to progress? So we answer the question, how strong is strong enough? So if you can goblet squat 50% of your body weight for 10 reps, I would say you are strong enough for most things that you want to do in your life, and strong enough to go to front squat. So 50% of your body weight goblet squat 10 times lets me ask a better question and lets me make a better decision to what we do next. And we have standards for every single exercise or main exercise that we do. So for example, a single leg deadlift, you want to be able to do 80% of your body weight on one leg for 8 reps. And yeah, that's a lot of weight. So if I'm 200 pounds, that's 80-pound dumbbells in each hand. That's 160 pounds for 8 reps. Yeah, it's hard to do, but that I want it to be difficult so that you have to strive to get there. Because nobody comes into the gym and says, I wonder what I single leg deadlift, what my max is, right? Everyone comes in, wants to know their bench press, lose 10 pounds. So I've got to make those things applicable or exciting for my people. So when I put a standard there and I say, hey, if you want to be really good at this, you need to be able to do 80% of your body weight with 2 dumbbells on one leg for a single leg deadlift. All of a sudden people start reaching for those standards. So you can go to exercisechecklist.com. You can find out more there. We have certifiedfsc.com as well if you want to check out the CFSC course, which is 8 hours of this, but you experience it live. We go through every single one of these buckets and then show you all the regressions and progressions for each exercise. I'm going to update the CFSC website with the new regression progression sheet in the next week here. I'm still finalizing it with Coach Boyle. If you want it, I can send it to you, but you can also just wait and get it on the back end of the website. Kevin and I are going to talk next week about integrating fitness with rehab. We talked a little bit about that today, but tomorrow, next week will be a little bit more of a discussion, a live discussion. We'll let more people in. This webinar, I wanted to make sure that we got at least 2 of these in. And I will maybe even fill out the 3rd case study here just so everyone can see that visually. Okay, cool. Thanks for watching. Peace out. Take care. Stay healthy. And see you next week.